cross-country coaches and track coaches. What do you attribute that to? What are you seeing that seems to be effective in the lives of young people? Just speak to that.
I would say with our program, probably just that it's always been family. From the time when we both ran, I think, all the way until through now. People who have graduated out of the program still come back and help, still contribute meals. Alumni come back, and everyone just feels like they're a part of a family. So it just becomes a bigger and bigger family every year.
You know, I noticed in your, Rusty had emailed me a team vision statement and some of the philosophy or the beliefs that you have as coaches. And it seems the family emphasis that you just mentioned is really a prominent theme. And you all have kind of helped create a family. In fact, I remember back when Will ran, I took a picture of all the cross-country shoes that were at our door for one of those in-home meals. And it was just awesome to see everybody gathered. And you've been doing that for years. So that's one of the things you do, isn't it, that helps create. Okay. One of the other points that I see on here is that, and I really like this one, especially in light of my topic today, is that a part of your team vision, among the many, 7 or 8 things here, it says, be a positive team member, negativity must die. I like that. Okay? So, speak to this from a couple angles. Why is negativity, what does that do to a team? Maybe you've observed some things, what negativity does to a team. And then on the other side of it, what does a positive attitude tend to do for a team? So,
for the most part, a good team everybody has to get along. And so a lot of times just the differing attitudes and stuff that you have on those teams, it either tears the teams apart and it's going to keep them from reaching their full potential, or if they do if everything acts like a family and they all get along, you're probably going to reach your goals a little bit better, just the way that things move out. Okay. And as a coach, you love positive attitudes. Right. I mean, you guys reinforce that in so many different ways. Right. And that's awesome. As coaches too, not just as a team, but in life, I know that you probably stand back at times and you look at your teams and you think, okay, how can I best coach this team so that they have the best chances of success as a team? And you probably look at each individual, runner and competitor, and think, well, this is where they can improve, and this is what they could do different. And I know you're always doing that as coaches, and that's what makes it probably such a powerful program. But as you think about stepping back even a bit further from just the team idea, and you're looking at life, okay, and you're thinking, well, what is it that not only would help them be successful in running, but how could they be successful in life? What are a couple of things maybe that comes up from time to time in your conversations with some of your runners that you can kind of guide them toward life issues, not just a competition issue? We talk about character a lot.
Okay.
I know that when I was running also, I had great coaches to model good character.
Yeah.
And so, so the character is huge, and then setting goals and then just working really hard to achieve those. We talked a lot about just being good citizens, and so hopefully all that, the character and the citizenship and all that will help them out throughout their life.
Exactly. Setting up for life. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say I make sure that they're not just my athletes. They're my family first. So
yes.
I make it my business to be in their lives, like things that are outside of cross-country, outside of track. If somebody looks like they're having a rough day, I want to get a hold of them and find out what's wrong, why they're having a hard time. Even when they're off at college, I try to make sure that I send something off to them at least once or twice a year, and I still keep in contact with those kids, and weddings and baby showers and everything. It just keeps going forever.
Yeah.
So just that the person, each individual kid that I coach, is more valuable to me as a person than as an athlete. I would like to help them be the best athlete that they can, but I want them to know that just no matter what happens on the cross-country course or on the track,
Yes.
that I love them just
Yes.
for them.
Yes.
And also just passion, having a passion for something, for anything. Their
Good.
passion might not be cross-country, or it might not be track, it might be something else, but they're just doing this to get ready for that, or just because they enjoy it. But I want every kid to find something that they're passionate about, because I think you should be passionate about something.
Yes, I agree with you, and you guys are passionate about running. I think that it's neat when athletes see their coaches endeavoring to do the very things they're exhorting them to do. Like, how many miles do you run every week, Nicole? I mean,
This week I'm going to have 75.
Okay.
But I'm training for something. That's not normal.
oh man, that makes me tired. Oh, that's a lot of miles. But do you also run with your runners sometimes, Rusty? Or
I run during the season, but when I'm not with them, I don't run much.
Awesome. You know what? We love this couple, and we praise God for them, and He's using them in so many neat and creative ways. What you're hearing Nicole and Rusty say is really just a tip, because the relational aspect, and I really think that's what's key, what's been key for them over the years, is they love their runners. They love them, and like Nicole said, they're tracking with them. So they're highly relational. And so it's not just about breaking a sweat or a record or representing. It's about connecting with the people that you're running for. And so we just want to affirm their effort today. Can we do that? Yes? Thank you, guys. That's awesome. Thanks. Thank you. Keep up the good work. Really appreciate their lives, and I really appreciate their emphasis in the team vision and things, especially the part about being a positive team member. It's so important to be to make some decisions in whatever you do in life, to make some decisions that you're going to look at life a certain way. Sometimes we default to viewpoints maybe that we've picked up from different places. I mean, all you got to do is watch the news from day to day. Not that, it's good to stay up on current events and things, but you can watch the news from day to day and pick up a lot of negativity, and that impacts how you view life. And so today, I want to talk a little bit about that in the message. Another thing I think that I'd like to point out is on the blog this week, someone asked a question, and I've asked the media team if they can pull that up for me. This is another thing that lets me know that there's a lot of negativity that's circulating at this time of year in people's lives and things. And I don't know if we can blow that up where people can see it. Maybe we can a little bit. But here's the question. If a person commits suicide because there is no way out of a life situation that occurred in the past, and family will be better without them in the future, will they automatically go to hell? Or could they go to heaven if their heart is right with Jesus? Please explain in detail. Now listen, when you ask a pastor to explain in detail, buckle it up, because you're going to get some detail, okay? And I want to address this because I don't know, it's anonymous, so I don't know, the person might be here this morning. And I want you to know that if you're here and you are feeling yourself descend into a pit of negativity and depression, especially this time of year, I want you to know there's a better way to think about this, okay? That life is good. And so I try to emphasize that in my response, that life is precious, and also to bring in the spiritual warfare aspect, because what I find intriguing is that Jesus reference Satan as the god of this world or age. He does that in John's Gospel. And so he acknowledges that there's a measure of influence, a negative influence. Talking about negativity. There's a measure of negative influence, and it takes on a personality. So evil is not just this land, right? It's a personal presence, and someone that rules and reigns in that domain, and they have a measure of influence in our world. And so he is working to make you a negative person.
All right? And so Jesus acknowledges as much. And so I just share with the anonymous question asker, the presence of evil does exist because humans are image bearers of the one true God. Satan, a fallen angel who despises God's image bearers, wants to obliterate all humans. And if he can obliterate them, he will at least, if he can't obliterate them, he will at least confuse them about gender or life purpose or the meaning of life. Way back to the beginning, when it was just God and spiritual beings, Satan rebelled. He was relegated to what was then known as the region of earth. He made a mess of it without form and void. And what you got to remember is that there's not just one fall, there's two falls in the Bible. Two falls. You have a fall of human beings, but prior to that, there was another fall. A fall of an angelic being, Satan. And the Bible gives us evidence of this, okay? And so, Satan, a fallen angel who despises God's image bearers, right? He can't get at God. God's way up here. Satan's way down here. I can't get at God. Who can I get at? The image bearers. Those little people in the world that reflect the beauty of who this God is. I'll attack them. Right? I'll mar the image of God in them. I'll get them to tarnish the image. I'll confuse them over gender. I'll confuse them over life purpose. I'll use whatever means of influence I have in their life to get them to I'm not going to say underachieve, but to get them convinced that they just can settle for eking out of an existence and just trying to survive from day to day rather than thrive, with joy. I'll affect their mind, their spirit, their emotions. I'll mess up their world. And boy, he's doing a good job of that. Okay? And so, Jesus acknowledges this. But even though Satan made a mess of what God had made, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. All right? That's a beautiful thing. Out of nothing He made. But then there's a fall somewhere. And without form and void sounds a whole lot like Satan to me. A whole lot like a demonic negative presence. But God cleans it up. He places a newly created man and woman in what used to be Satan's domain. He gives them authority. He says, rule over, reproduce, rule over. You're the masters here. You're the vice regents here. Not Satan. You are. You rule in his domain. What used to be his domain, I've given you authority. And so the thought seems to be man, a lesser being, living in dependence upon God is greater than Satan, a greater being, living in independence of God. Dependence and independence, key words in that statement. So man was in charge in what used to be Satan's house, but we did the unthinkable. We gave the keys back to Satan when we pulled out of a right relationship with God. Back in the garden, man was in charge. Satan was underneath our feet. Mankind chose to side with the rebellion, and thus we lost our authority over the evil one. But there's good news, and here it is. Christ, the God-man, came and won back our right to rule. We can assume some of His authority through prayer and other ways, and thus begin to see His kingdom spread over the world until He returns. Now let's go up a couple of clicks here. So when we as humans choose to exist, listen to me now. When you choose to exist, when you choose to go on living, it makes a statement in the spiritual realm. And if we exist for I shared this one time in a discipleship class, and the lady at the end of it, she said, you know what? If we exist for no other reason than to put Satan in his place, it's reason enough. I choose to live. I choose it. Because it says something about what I think of God as Creator, and it lets me be one of the image bearers that reflects the goodness of this Creator in spite of a domain of evil that endeavors to make inroads into our lives. Okay? So, in light of these things, I exhort you to choose life. Suicide is not of God. If you're here today and you're thinking about this, it is not of God. I want you to hear me on that. Life is of God. If someone loses their perspective in a momentary lapse and engages in actions that end up taking their lives, then we have to bear in mind that even though this is not God's will, our hope will always be to have the righteousness of Christ credited to our account. And so if you're considering suicide this holiday season, choose life. And if you have a loved one who has already committed suicide, then rest in the goodness of God, who knows all things. He will take care of your loved one. And I realize that this is a much deeper maybe answer than you had thought about receiving, but I want you to see that we're in a spiritual warfare. I want you to continue to be one of God's living image bearers. It brings glory to your Creator. Choose life. Choose life. And so
there's a guy by the name of Paul in the New Testament he understood this. And because he understood it, he always talks about the kingdom of God advancing. The kingdom of God that's invaded our world. And it's as if, and Paul and a lot of the Jewish scholars had what we call a developed eschatology. What do I mean by that? Eschatology, escha, last days, ology, study of the last days. Okay? They had these views of the last days, and when they saw Jesus and what He was about and what He did and the message He proclaimed, they were amazed. They got all the negativity turned positive. Why? Because God's eschatological plan was being enacted. It was going into effect because Jesus had come. And the kingdom was now invading a fallen planet. And Satan was going to be defeated. And a kingdom, a righteous kingdom, would come and rule. Okay? And Paul was excited about that. And Paul gave his life to the proclamation of the gospel that's embedded in that message. And so I want to encourage you this season, this is how you want to think about this. This is where you want to let your mind go. That you choose to exist because it makes a statement. God is existing through you. And when you choose to live, in fact, I like what C.S. Lewis says. He says that someday your neighbor that you tend to look at in a common kind of way, someday when this age gets swallowed by a new one, and we take on a totally restored state in our human bodies and things, he says that we'll be tempted to fall down and worship our neighbor because they will be so glorified. They will be such a wonderful reflection of the God who made them. Okay? And so when you are a human being and you accept the gender from which you've been called and you operate from that gender and you do relationships from the perspective in which you've been created, all right, and you tap into the resources of Christ and you have Christ the center of your life, you have every reason in the world to be optimistic. It's going to get better. So I don't know where you're at, who asked the question or what you're going through, but you're loved. And you choose life. We love you and God loves you and there's people in your life that care for you and think the world of you and you probably don't even know it. And you have so much to offer. So much to offer. You can give yourself to good things. You can grow your mind. You can grow spiritually. You can go deeper in your walk with God and He can use your life for good. You might end up coaching a team someday, like we've heard, or you might end up helping pull a family together. God is going to use don't you think about taking your life. God is good. And He's going to see you through this. And you're going to be on the winning side of this thing. You have every reason to be optimistic. Now listen, I think of something that there was a story that Ronald Reagan used to tell. And he says it's the story of two little boys, and he would use this, and I've heard it and read it in different places as well. But he said there was two little boys. One was an optimist, and one was a pessimist. And the pessimist was placed in a room full of toys, but he continued to whine and cry. I mean, if he got CDs, he'd whine about not having a player to play it. If he got a toy, he'd whine about not having a figure to sit in it and drive it. You know, a toy truck or whatever. So he was just always a pessimistic little boy. And so with every toy, he found a problem. Well, in contrast to this, the optimist child was placed in a room full of horse manure and given a shovel. Yes, the optimistic child was placed in a room, maybe a barn setting full of horse manure, and he was given a shovel, and the optimist was happily shoveling away the manure, just with enthusiasm. He was going hard, all right? Optimistic little boy. And when they asked why he was so happy, he said, you know what? He said, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere. There has to be. I just know it. And boy, he's going at it because he's going to find the pony. All right? Now listen, you got one of two ways you can view life. You can view it on the optimistic side of the ledger, or you can view it on the negative, pessimistic side of the ledger. Now, there's another category we could probably wedge in between the two, but it's just going to complicate it. I'm going to keep it simple this morning. We could say realist and realism, maybe wedges in between the two. But we've got optimists. Basically, we have optimists and pessimists in the world. And this is a very real way that we view life. In fact, a key question that you have to answer this morning, and I say answer it today. Don't wait till Thanksgiving gets here. Don't wait till Christmas rolls around the corner. Okay? The question is, how are you going to view life? How are you going to view it? Because if you're going to be optimistic, and we have every right to be, and I'm going to demonstrate, because I want to wrap up Philippians chapter 1 today, just the first chapter. We've been kind of working in the book of Philippians, the first chapter. Again, the sheets are available to clue you in if you're coming to the movie late. Okay? Pick up a sheet and it'll help you. But as we look at this, you're going to see a very optimistic Apostle Paul in the first chapter. And so we're just going to kind of review a few things here and wrap up chapter 1. We'll prepare ourselves for Philippians chapter 2 next week and following. And it's going to be perfect as we head into the holiday season. Philippians chapter 2, very powerful. It's Christmas like you've never seen it before. I'm excited. I'm optimistic. There's got to be a pony in Philippians chapter 2 somewhere. I know there is. And you're going to find it early. Okay? But this is a decision you've got to make. If you're going to have joy to the fullest, if your relationship's going to go better in your life, you want to choose joy. You want to choose the optimistic side of the ledger or the table or the column. Okay? Expectation, hope, joy, possibility. These are all characteristics of the optimistic mind at work. People are attracted to optimism. If we are pessimistic, then life will be filled with cynicism. You'll roll the eyes a lot. You'll make little negative jokes a lot. You'll be gloomy and depressed. You'll kind of spread that wet blanket on people that you're around, and people will be repelled by it. Have you ever been covered up by a wet blanket? It's horrible. I've put some wet socks on before and wet pants, maybe hiking or something. I hate putting on wet clothes in the morning. It is depressing. All right? Especially when you're in the woods and it's cold. But it's equally depressing in relationships. I'm here to help you guys. You can be negative. I'll still love you. It's okay. I walked into Gander Mountain here not long ago, and a guy says, "You getting the help you need?" I said, "I'm going to just act like a depressed person." So I said, "Well, not really." You know, not really. And his manager was training him. He looked at him. He looked at me, and he busted out laughing. Like, finally, somebody's going to be honest with us here. Listen, it's no way to be. You've got to make a choice. You have to make this choice early in life. I've made this choice, and I have to say now, I battle with it sometimes, okay? Sometimes I want to slip in the pessimistic side of the ledger and operate from there and think the worst when I really should believe the best. And I have to admit, it's a struggle sometimes. But I have chosen, and in fact, I think, you know, like I said, I struggle with it sometimes, but I feel like maybe I've chosen it enough over the years. I mean, it's almost like you have to tell me that somebody's trying to offend me. Okay? You almost have to just spell it out. "Joey, they just insulted you." "Oh, they did? What did they do?" "Well, they just insulted you, dude. This is what..." Oh, okay. Well, maybe I need to take offense. Is that what I need to do? No. You know, I've just chosen to live this way for so long, you almost have to spell it out for me. Okay? That's Paul. I'm trying to just live up to Paul's example. He wasn't waiting for people to offend him. He wasn't waiting for people to just create more negative news in his life. Wherever Paul was, he was going to create something positive, something good. And this guy's in prison. He's chained to a guy. His personal privacy is taken away. He's been incarcerated for 4 years. 2 years in travel, 2 years in Rome. Okay? Life is not ideal for him. But you'll never find, outside of Jesus, a more positive person in the New Testament than Paul. He chose to operate
on the optimistic side of the ledger. And it made such a difference. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, optimism, pessimism is all yada, yada, yada. It's all that in a bag of chips, right? I mean, it's just like, okay, I've heard this before. I really don't know if what he's saying is exactly, he's telling me the truth on this. It just seems like we're made up. Our personalities have been a certain way, and we're always going to be this way, and nothing's ever going to change it. Well, there is some truth to what I'm saying, guys, because a lot of truth to what I'm saying, because there are some people who work very hard at pessimism. There's a guy by the name of Arthur Schopenhauer. He's a German philosopher, and he invested an enormous amount of time into his pessimistic ideology. When we are young, Schopenhauer says, we look upon life with excitement and eagerness. We are like children sitting before the curtain in a theater, he says. In happy and tense anticipation, we await for the curtains to draw to see what the stage will present. We don't know what might show up, so we're hopeful. We're little, we're children, we're hopeful, it's something good. But he says it doesn't take long for our optimism to waver, and just like a theater performance that's not going so well, soon we discover that what life is actually like. And then, says Schopenhauer, we realize that children are simply deluded, that they're sentenced not to death, but to life. Although they have not yet discovered what their punishment will consist of. I mean, this is really, really depressing stuff that this guy writes and presents. He asserts that when we reach middle age, the honest person will have to admit that on the balance, life is a disappointment. It's even a bit of a betrayal. He believed that we live imprisoned in the worst possible world. God should not have even created us. And I think, to say the least, it's very, very deflating. And in fact, if I keep talking about Schopenhauer, I'm going to mess my message up. So we're going to let him go. But there's some people that work really hard at their pessimism in academic, intellectual, and ideological circles. Okay, now, do you and I read Schopenhauer for morning devotions? No. Do we pull it off and read it for extra collateral reading in our spare time? No. Who wants to read a guy that writes like that, right? So what we do, we don't traffic in what I call hardcore pessimism. What we do is the soft core variety. Here's what the soft core variety looks like. Slide number 11, if you would, please. Optimist. Okay, slide number 11. You're going to see this kind of on the screen. The optimist, many times he sees the best. He's the glass is half full kind of person. The pessimist sees the worst. The glass is half empty kind of person. On the optimist side, the optimist will find the positive. Look at all we've accomplished. The pessimist will find the negative. There are so many obstacles. In fact, there's too many. How can we ever get this done? The optimist, he looks at events and they happen because of them. I made a difference. This is what I was able to accomplish. And the pessimist looks at things and they look at life and things that have happened, and it's like everything happens in spite of what they do. I'm just a cog in the wheel. Why did I do this every day? The optimist has a favorable future. I can't wait until tomorrow. Let's take action. There's pony in here somewhere. The pessimist says, oh boy, another day. Why bother trying? The optimist says, hey, there's joy. I love life. I love my friends. I'm going to go on living just because Pastor Joey said if I choose life, then I'm making a statement somewhere that I'm putting somebody in his place. And buddy, I'm going to do that with joy. The depressed person says, the pessimist says, life stinks and you do too. Could you sit over a couple more seats? I can't stand the smell. Right? That's what the pessimist will often think and dwell on and obsess over. The optimist says encouraging things. You motivate the team.
You know, encouraging influence is good, and we heard a little bit about that from our coaches today. When you've got optimistic people on a team, it just spreads, and everybody's lifted by that, and they're enlarged, and they want to do better than just PTs. They want to do the very best they can for the team, right? And get the team where they want to go. And then a pessimist will often have a cynical influence. They'll just drag everybody down. They're just, it's that wet blanket. Life is just so hard. Now listen, I want you to be honest with your negativity. It's important. But I also want you to see an alternative way that you can think about life. I want you to get on the left side of this column and begin to operate on it. And it's an intentional decision you got to make. And Paul will show us this. We're going to read through Philippians 1 in just a second. And you tell me whether or not you think Paul's an optimist or a pessimist. You tell me after we read through some of these verses that we're going to read in Philippians 1 again. Okay, slide 13 here. An optimist always, many times they have a high self-worth. There are people in my life who love me. The pessimist has low self-worth. Everybody hates me. I'm going to the garden to eat worms. Okay, that's just how I'm going to do it. And if it makes me sick, I'll get rid of them and eat some more. All right. Problems are temporary with the optimist. It will get better. It's going to get better. Tomorrow holds another day. The pessimist's problems are permanent. It will always be this way. It will never change. And you saw it in the little story. Got to be a pony in here somewhere. There's high expectations. Even when there's horse crap everywhere, there's high expectations. I would rather expect the best and find good in every occasion and not focus on disappointments. That's what the optimist says I'm going to do. That's how I'm going to live life. The pessimist has low expectations. I would rather expect the worst and be pleasantly surprised on the rare occasion when good happens than be disappointed all the time. I'll just lower my expectations and I'll live there. You see? So this is a soft core variety of pessimism that we often peddle. And we kind of buy into, without ever reading Schopenhauer, the old German philosopher who took it on as a life mission to present a whole philosophy of pessimism. This is how it kind of gets lived out in our day-to-day lives. You got a little Schopenhauer in you, and I'm here to tell you this morning, Jesus trumps Schopenhauer. Paul trumps Schopenhauer. I got my bets on Paul. I got my bets on Jesus. I got my bets on those guys because if I will define life and life purpose as those guys define it, I'm hedging a bet that I bet you my joy quotient goes up a tick, at least maybe 2. You see. And so I'm presenting and proposing and arguing this morning, I want you to get on that left side of the ledger. Get on the left column. Operate from that column. And you have every right to. Because of what Christ has done. And I've shown you those mature perspectives for the last several weeks. Those new mature perspectives that we can have in life because of what Christ has done and what He's doing in the world through people like Paul and others. Well, maybe you've seen the John Hancock commercials that's been televised recently. John Hancock is the insurance investment company, and they show you in the commercial on TV, they show you a critical moment in someone's life where you know something is going to happen, incredibly important, but you're not sure what's going to happen. And then they'll stop the drama just shy of revealing what's going to happen in the story, and they invite you to go to their website to see what happens next. Well, I don't like when people kind of do that on the TV or whatever. It's like, well, okay, so I got to go get a computer and I got to see what happens next. All right, that's how it's going to roll. Okay, so I usually end up not doing anything. But I got curious and I wanted to see what I saw. One little advertisement and kind of this little story that was playing out in about 60 seconds, and I got curious. And this particular feature presents a married couple driving an unidentified person who is sitting in their back seat to some major life drop-off point. And the little clip is called The Ride. And after you view these commercials, I'm sure all the pessimists are thinking the worst and all the optimists are thinking the best. Why don't you just take a look at this? Let's run the ride, video number 1, and we'll... Yeah, there we go.
I thought I'd be ready for this.
You'll be fine. He'll be fine.
Yeah. You ready?
And then they cut. What in the world is going to happen? You know, the optimist is going to think one way, and a pessimist is going to think the other way. How does this thing resolve? And so it just kind of leaves you wondering. They look in the back seat. Are you ready? Who are they talking to? What's going to happen in the drama? Well, I'm going to show you at the end of the message the 3 optional endings that they have on their website for that little clip. And it kind of makes you want to take a deep breath. And some of the other things that they show, just these real tense situations where people might be losing their jobs or their home, getting bad news that someone has not made it in an accident or something like that. They kind of set these up, and you're like, oh no, what's going to happen? So you kind of wonder about it all day. So I'm going to go check it out and see what's up. And so I did, and it kind of sets up a conclusion for the message here today. But okay, what I want you to do, like I said, we've been working through Philippians 1. I want to hasten here through Philippians 1 and just read some of the verses. Let's just go to slide 2. Slide 2, and let's read through this passage all the way through to the end of the chapter. And then I want to back up and go back to our contrast chart between optimism and pessimism. And I want to show you how Paul lives out every single point on the optimistic side of the ledger. All right? Everything in the first chapter of Philippians, you can see this guy has chosen to be an optimistic person. He says, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. What has happened to him? Well, he's in jail. All right. As a result, it has become clear that throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. And because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. It is true that some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. The latter do so out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The former preach Christ out of selfish ambition. I've kind of talked to you about that and unpacked that. Not sincerely, supposing that they can stir up trouble for me while I am in chains. Verse 18. But what does it matter? Very mature perspective. The important thing is that in every way, whether from false motives or true, Christ is preached, and because of this, I rejoice. Yes, and I will continue to rejoice. For I know that I will, see, he chooses that I will continue to rejoice. I will continue to rejoice. I rejoice, and future tense, I will continue to rejoice. I'm not stopping. I'm going to operate on the optimistic side of the ledger. That's where I'm going to choose to live. For I know that through your prayers and God's provision of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, what has happened to me will turn out for my deliverance. Verse 20, I eagerly expect and hope that I will no way be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage, so that now as always Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. If I am to go on living in the body, this will mean fruitful labor for me. Yet what shall I choose? I do not know. Verse 23, I am torn between the two. I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is better by far. Much, much better. There's just superlatives there. But it is more necessary for you that I remain in the body. Convinced of this, I know that I will remain. The optimist, right? I'm going to make it. I'm going to survive this. I'm ready to go. Either way, absence is presence. I'm ready. If I'm absent from you, I'm with Christ. If I'm absent from Christ, I'm with you, and I still have Christ, and I'm still used. I'm going to let my life count whether I live or die. It's going to count for Him. I know that I will remain, he says, though. I'm confident. I will continue with all of you for your progress and joy in the faith. Verse 26, so that through my being with you again, your boasting in Christ Jesus will abound on account of me. Whatever happens,
conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. So if I make it, great. Then I want to come and see you. And not only that, I want to invest in you. I want you to go ahead and start making progress now. If I don't make it, well, you're going to hear about it. But as long as I live, I want to know that you stand firm in the one Spirit, striving together as one for the faith of the gospel. A couple more verses and we're done. Verse 28, without being frightened in any way by those who oppose you, this is a sign to them that they will be destroyed, but that you will be saved, and that by God. When you hold steady, when the pressure is on, and you don't, you maintain your perspective, your optimism, God uses it, and He uses it to make a statement to people around you. Verse 29, for it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ, not only to believe in Him, but also to suffer for Him. It's a part of life sometimes. Sometimes we flesh things out better in a season of suffering. We see life more clearly. We flesh out mission statements and things in a better way when we go through some rough places. Verse 30, since you are going through the same struggle you saw I had, and now hear that I still have. So the Philippians had some struggles too. Paul was incarcerated and they were going through their own personal struggles there in the city of Philippi. Now, if we go back to slide 11. The slide 11. Okay? The optimists, they see the best. The glass is half full. What does Paul say? Christ is being preached, he says. The optimist, Paul, he finds the positive. Look at all we've accomplished. There are believers in Caesar's household. He says this a little later. You have a part in that, Philippians. You have a part in it. You've supported me here. And you've enabled me to do some things, even though I'm incarcerated. Events happen because of them. I made a difference. He's saying here, I'm winning Roman guards to Christ one by one. Yeah, it's not good. Maybe that I'm incarcerated, but God is using this, and one by one people are coming to Christ. And I can't. And Paul was always looking for a favorable future. Slide 12. I can't wait until tomorrow. Let's take action. I'm going to be set free, he says. I just know it. I'm going to be set free, and I'm going to be able to come and visit with you. A slight chance maybe I won't be, but I'm going to believe. I'm going to be set free. I'm going to rejoice. I love life. I love my friends. Paul says, I pray for you all the time. God's going to complete some stuff in you. Philippians 1:5. Faithful is He who calls you, who also will do it. God is going to complete some stuff in your life. I believe that He is. And He motivates the team with that encouraging word. Slide 13. Paul has this high self-worth. There are people in my life who love me. You Philippians sent a special messenger with money for me. He almost died, but I got the gift, and it's just such an encouragement. Problems are temporary with the optimist, right? It will get better. You keep progressing, Philippians. I'm going to be liberated soon. I'm going to come and I'm going to keep discipling you. High expectations. That's Paul. I will be with you again soon. I just know it. I like what E. Stanley Jones wrote. He says, the early Christians did not say in dismay, look what the world has come to. But in delight, they said, look what has come to the world. They did not say, look what the world has come to. But in delight, wrote Jones, look what has come to the world. Phenomenal what has come to the world. He who has won back our right to rule and reign and to unleash kingdom resources through prayer in the one Spirit, Paul says. It's phenomenal what can happen in the world when the Christ followers get a vision for that. And they saw not only that sin had abounded in the world, but that grace did much more abound. These early Christians, Paul included, they saw that not merely there's ruin in the world, but there's resources for the reconstruction of that ruin. That life is optimistic now in light of the resurrection. There's new hope. We can formulate a new vision, a new worldview. We can leave Schopenhauer behind. We can leave
the loss and despair behind. We can leave fatalism behind. We can move on to faith and confidence and hope and joy that there's a better tomorrow. Again, I assert, Jesus trumps Schopenhauer. The Apostle Paul trumps Schopenhauer. There's a reason worth living. And Paul does a wonderful job of articulating that and arguing for that here in this letter. I like what he said. Slide 7 quickly. Slide 7. He says in verse 27, whatever happens, spoken like a true optimist. He's a realist. He allows for things that happen in the world. There's stuff that happens that we don't always want to see happen. We understand that. But he says, no matter what happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. No matter what happens, I want you guys to stay optimistic in the world and continue to proclaim the announcement of what God has done for the world through Jesus. I looked into the word, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel, and that's actually it's like one word in Greek, but it takes a whole English phrase to kind of get it communicated, and it's an unusual term, and it means to conduct yourselves as citizens. So what is Paul saying? Well, I think he's saying that I want you guys, if people look at your life, they will find your life attractive because you're engaged in your world, you're loving your neighbors, you're involved in the processes of what a good citizen would be. Paul was not asking them because, okay, I'm in prison, you might go to prison too, and because I'm in hard times, you may have hard times too. So circle the wagons, put water in the moats, draw up the bridges, and let's all huddle together and let's just hope that we can survive this. No, that's the act of a pessimist. Paul says, no, we're not pessimists. We are the ultimate optimist. We live life with a sense of joy. We live life with a sense of hope. We don't retreat. We make advances. We engage in our communities. We might vote in elections for those candidates that best represent our worldview and a biblical worldview. Okay? We vote in elections. We visit with our neighbors. We're engaged in the great debates of our time. We write. We converse. We blog. We're engaged. We coach. We work. We are advancing and being a living gospel in everywhere we go and whatever we do. Paul's engaged in the community, and he wants these guys in Philippi to be engaged in their community and to have an attractive life where we're not only Christ followers and we not only are good citizens of heaven, but we make great earthly citizens too. And even though he was caught up in a legal environment where he's incarcerated, and there's different reasons as to why he was incarcerated at this time, and maybe I'll get into that a little bit later, but here he is, and he's trying to help these guys. You know what? Don't look at everybody as the enemy here. I want you to engage. Yeah, the governmental process has incarcerated me, but I'm not anti-government. God uses government to do certain things sometimes. And I'm going to work within the auspices of this government that may be out of control, and I'm a prisoner. I'm still going to let God use my life. I'm not going to let the government shut me down. Okay? And so he's engaged in government. He's engaged in the great debates of his time. He's not withdrawing here. He's not isolating. No, he's engaged, and he's encouraging his followers in Philippi. You engage in the process. Don't hunker down and hope and just wait and let the get on the sidelines, so to speak, and just kind of let the game pass you by. No, get on the field, man. Engage. There's work to do. If I can be a positive influence for Christ, chained to a Roman Italian soldier, you can be an influence for Christ, living your lives in your community every day. Get on the offensive. Get aggressive. Think positive things, that God can use your life for good in your world, in your community. That's what Paul is saying. I want you to conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. And some of you guys have done that in an ultimate kind of way. You have engaged in great debates and processes of your time. You have been willing to... In fact, we just celebrated this past week. Some of you... How many veterans we got in the building? How many veterans we got in the building? Yes. Yeah, hey, let's give it up for the veterans, right? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, here's guys, America doesn't always get it right, but here's guys who understand a cause and they answer the call. They answer the call to make a positive difference in the world and to create a place where the gospel that Paul's talking about can be freely taught, freely proclaimed. And so ask yourself the question, are you conducting yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ? Are you engaged in the process? Are you confronting worldviews? Are you living a life where you honor family and human dignity and you defend freedom if called upon to do so? All right? That's what Paul's talking about. Engage. Make a difference. Don't just spiral into a spiral of silence where you say and do nothing. Engage. Make a difference in your age. And then whether I come and see you or hear about you in my absence, Paul says, I will know that you stand firm. It's an athletic term. Stand firm. Hold your block. Hold your positions. Okay? And for all the positive, all the optimists, he says, I want you to strive together, the text says, as one for the faith of the gospel. You can hold together. We can hold together no matter how rough it gets. Paul's in prison, and we might be next, but we're going to be okay because why? We're a team. We're going to be okay here. And even though the evil one tries to breach us and tries to get between us, and the evil one tries to split, he tries to divide, he tries to create suspicion and smoldering resentments that impact relationships and personality conflicts. He tries to get us not to talk to each other and have nothing to do with one another and look down on others and cut others off from our fellowship and families and conversation and contact. That's the work of the evil one. And Paul says, on the positive side, I want you to stand firm and stand against all of that. And for the pessimist, he says, verse 28, here's the negative side, without being frightened. Without being frightened. Verse 28. It's a metaphor of timidity. It's taken out of the horse, kind of the horse industry, where a horse would get jumpy and skittish. And Paul uses that term to explain that sometimes things happen in the world. Holidays happen and we start facing depressing thoughts and maybe some bad news comes down the pike and it takes us off guard and the tendency is for us to get skittish and scared and frightened and to run away from it all and not face it. And Paul says on the negative side, he says, don't do it. You don't have to be frightened because you are ultimate optimist because of what Christ has done in the world. And I can tell you I'm an example of what He's doing in my life because I can never do this without Him. And He has been at work in my world and in my life. And He's at work in your life today. And you have every reason to walk out of this building with a sense of optimism that things are going to get better tomorrow. They will, because Christ is enough. Okay, you've been wondering the whole message how one of those John Hancock commercials turns out, okay, that I showed earlier. Let's watch the 3 optional endings. And we'll just watch these one after another, non-stop, and then I want to offer some closing comments here as you're thinking about leaving here this morning. Okay, let's roll them.
I thought I'd be ready for this.
You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Yeah. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
We're going inside.
My mother, your mother, never had to go back to work. Whoa! Oh my God! Let's go. You ready?
Let's go in.
Give me your hand. Jeff. Go.
I think they got some of your friends in there.
You ready?
Yeah.
Let's see what we got going on here. Okay. Well, registration's over there.
Yep.
A lot different than when we went, huh?
Yeah. Everything's different.
Okay.
It's the guitar.
You ready? Stay down.
All right. Let me just fix you up a little bit. Here. I got it. Okay. I can do it. Okay.
Just take your time.
Thank you.
I get the bag straight.
It's nice, right?
Question I got for you in closing this morning, are you ready? Are you ready to do life? And the only way, and you would expect this to come from me, the only way you're ready to do life is you have to have Christ. You can't do it without Him. When it comes time to drop off that little one to daycare for the first time, you know how hard that is? When it comes time to say goodbye and you're going back to work, you need Jesus. When it comes time to drop that college freshman off, you pull up to the curb, you drop them for the last time, for a long time, and you wonder what worldviews they're going to be exposed to while they're at the university, what ideologies are going to be presented, what they're going to say about Schopenhauer, and whether or not Schopenhauer is going to find lodging in the mind of that young college freshman. Are you ready? What about that parent? Comes time when they got to make a transition. They can't live by themselves anymore. And you pull up and you check them in to a place that's never been home, but it's going to become their home. Are you ready? Are you ready to do life? Are you ready for these life events? Can you make it without Christ? I'm arguing this morning you're not going to make it very well without Christ. But if you'll open up your heart to Jesus, just like Paul, if you'll accept Him into your life, that's the first step of getting to the left side of the ledger. That's the first step of operating on the left side of the table on the screen. Now what about you? What have you done to your marriage because you refuse to get on the left side? What have you done to your relationships? You refuse to get on the left side. No, I'm going to stay on the right side. I'm going to be a pessimist. I'm on Schopenhauer the rest of my life. Don't do it. There's a better way, and it starts today. Christ is enough.